Financing a home is more expensive than ever, likely dashing dreams of many would-be home buyers. According to reports, the average long-term mortgage in the United States climbed to 7.49%, the highest it's been in 2 decades.
Meanwhile, U.S. stocks inched up Friday after a stronger than expected September jobs report was released this morning. Dow Jones Industrial Average went up 289 points, or 0.8%. The S&P 500 also added 0.8%, while the Nasdaq rose 0.1%. Last month's jobs creation was better than predicted. The economy added over 336,000 jobs. Should be noted, however, wages lagged, rising less than expected just last month. The meager bit of relief for workers who've seen their earnings decimated by inflation was championed by Acting Labor Secretary Julie Su this morning.
So earnings are up a bit. We definitely especially see that among lower wage workers, which is part of this idea that, the president has said, we're going to build an economy that leaves no one behind. That starts by looking at who's been left behind in the past. And to the extent that those lower wage workers are seeing average gains that are growing and also that are higher than inflation, means that workers have more money in their pockets.
I am not sure that the Biden administration is that good at communicating economic messages to the American people. I mean, the 2 conversations we've had so far today, including this one, about how they're messaging this stuff just is not the right way to do it. I would point out this is one of the topics that I cover pretty extensively for the last 2.5 years, basically ever since Biden took office. And when you look at what the Dow futures did immediately after the jobs report was released, those took a nosedive more than 200 points, because what this jobs report means, even though, again, it did beat what was expected by a significant margin, all that does is put more pressure on Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve to continue raising interest rates more aggressively, even though they're already at their highest level since the early 2000s. And that obviously creates more burdens for the American people, whether it's on their credit card debt, whether it's on their home buying abilities. It's just not good. Even small businesses end up being hurt by this, and especially for the Biden administration to go out and take this victory lap like they do off of any economic report that looks, just even on face value, to be a positive. It doesn't change the fact that the American people are still dealing with inflation that, since Biden took office, means goods purchased today are on average more than 16% more expensive than they were the day Joe Biden was sworn in. In addition, Americans, since the acting labor secretary brought up wages, the American people have seen negative real wages for a majority of the time and the months that President Biden has been in the White House, including more than 24 consecutive months in a row earlier in his administration. And you put all this together and you have this home market, this real estate market that is completely paralyzed, because people who bought a few years ago, who are looking to maybe upsize or grow their family, are afraid to sell their current home because they know buying a new home means they'll get these high interest rates. You have people who are looking to move from renting to buying who still can't make that jump because they know that they can't afford the interest rates that they'll be taking on. And so you've just got a situation where no one is moving anywhere. People are stuck in these high rent apartments because they can't achieve that small part of the American dream of owning a home. And while all this is going on, you have the Biden administration and Acting Secretary Julie Su sitting out there going, everything is great. Is this working? Are Americans buying this?
I honestly don't think so, and I hope not. And I hope today everyone that is someone who supported Joe Biden or still supports Joe Biden that is outraged or upset that he's continuing Trump policies around the border should be just as outraged he's continuing Trump policies with the economy. Jerome Powell is someone who was picked to chair the Federal Reserve under the Trump administration by Donald Trump. President Biden could have very well decided we need a different kind of policy making when it comes to monetary and fiscal policy in the United States, and he deliberately chose not to do that. You can't say that you're pursuing this brand of Bidenomics that is bottom up and middle out when Jerome Powell's explicit policy is to make more people unemployed. That means the working class, with the intent of reducing demand. Because if less people have jobs, there's more competition in the labor market to secure a job. So workers are willing to take lower wages and benefits than they should be taking for the work they're doing. And with the inflation rate what it's at, simply because the alternative is being unemployed and struggling to make ends meet even more. That is not a friendly economy for the working class in the United States. It's a great economy if you're a big corporation that can afford to grow and survive in a high interest rate environment, because now you're employing a bunch of workers that are taking very low wages and your profit margins are higher. And that's exactly what we've seen. The UAW is striking right now. Those workers took a huge pay cut in 2008 because of the recession and the trouble the auto industry was in. bipartisan. They have seen their wages steadily decline since then, as much as 19.3%. Yet the big three, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, Stellantis is commonly known as Chrysler, they have seen profits to the tune of $250 billion. That is insane. If you break it down, of the workers covered by the UAW contract, the 150,000 of them, that's $1.7 million per worker. And yet you have CEOs saying they can't afford to give this money to their workers. We have an economy that is set up so large corporations, CEOs, and shareholders profit tremendously, but working people struggle. Until they address that, they're never going to be able to say that they're an administration that fights for working people. You can't have these opposite policies of your labor secretary saying, we're seeing wage growth, we're seeing job growth, and then your chairman of the Federal Reserve saying their explicit policy is to make more people unemployed and bring wages down and raise interest rates so that the wealthy people who can afford to invest right now get even richer. It's absolutely absurd. And we're going to need the administration to change their tune before 2024 because Bidenomics has been now considered a term that is pejorative. It's a joke because working people haven't seen their lives improve.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, that Bidenomics is sort of the retread of Build Back Better, which was the campaign promise in 2020 that was never really delivered on. And so they were like, oh, we can't keep talking about this for the next election because we promised this with our first election and we were supposed to be doing that for the last 4 years. So then they just dubbed it Bidenomics. And as Joe Biden has often said, sometimes with a gaffe in there, that means to him, or at least in his mind, to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. But again, like you were just saying, the American people, the middle class, have not seen that. Working people have not experienced the sort of growth. And again, this idea that was originally Build Back Better, there are still sectors of the economy that have not yet built back to where they were before COVID hit in February of 2020, let alone have been built back better in any way. And I think it's going to be interesting sort of to see the history of at least the first term of the Biden administration and what it does to Democrats in the long term, because there have been recent polls. Gallup just had one, I believe it was earlier this week or late last week, talking about how Republicans now have the greatest advantage over Democrats, just generically speaking. When you poll the American people and ask them, who do you most trust to keep America prosperous? Republicans are running away with that issue by a margin that hasn't been seen since 1991. And so again, you have President Biden, who has made Bidenomics and the economy sort of this main focus of his administration, taking over, still kind of the middle of COVID. He was supposed to, as he promised, lead the United States and its citizens out of COVID and build us back better. And the American people just haven't seen that. And that's reflected in those polls where they are saying, we trust him less to handle the economy. And that doesn't even touch on his approval polling that's been underwater basically since he took office and continues to get some of the worst marks for his job performance when it comes to economic issues. He's just not able to win on this. And I wonder, in your opinion, is he going to be able to turn this around? Obviously, he has been, like I just said, making Bidenomics and the economy a main focus of his official work, and ostensibly will be part of his campaign once that's up and running a bit more. But, he's been out on the road touting the supposed economic wins. He's had all of his cabinet secretaries out on the road doing the same thing, supposedly talking about how great Bidenomics has been. But then you see polls like this, is Biden going to be able to turn it around by November 2024?
I think it's possible, but I think it's going to take bold action. And I haven't seen the administration be prepared to take bold action. They're under a lot of pressure right now and in hot water around the migration issue. I think they know they're going to need to make some big changes in their current policy approaches to a lot of the key issues before the 2024 election. And if I was the Biden administration, my strategic advice right now, whether Joe Biden wants a second term or ultimately sees him not getting to the point of getting a second term, I think for his legacy as a president, this is the right thing to do. And if he wants to win in 2024, it would be to align himself, honestly, with Ro Khanna and Matt Gaetz right now. The one barrier to major progress for working people and the improvement of their basic quality of life is having members of Congress actually represent the people, which means they cannot be beholden to corporate interests. There's clear legislation and a clear plan that is now bipartisan on the floor of Congress to have stock not be traded by members of Congress, so they're not considering their investments when they're making policy and regulations. And not only that, but to ban lobbying and have regulation on the lobbying of our politicians so they're not bought and sold by these corporations. The term limits is another concern. If he endorsed those two simple policy proposals, he would immediately become a legendary progressive president. It's that serious when we consider, who is Jerome Powell beholden to? Who are the members of Congress beholden to when they're not taking action to regulate these corporations that are making billions of dollars off of the backs of regular Americans that are struggling to make ends meet, and they're living in mansions and living in nice houses and getting tax cuts from the presidents? It's absolutely insane that that's the state of wealth inequality in the United States of America. CEO pay is 399 times the average worker in a company. If we have these corporations being able to pay their politicians not to regulate this insane capture of the wealth created by the working people in America, like, it's insane. It's exactly what Biden needs to be doing. We absolutely need a policy that's going to regulate our members of Congress and, honestly, the chair of the Federal Reserve from governing in a way that's in the direct opposite of the general welfare of the American people. I think he would become really popular and probably win if he did this.
Well, if Joe Biden decides to start working with Matt Gaetz, that would definitely be a story that you'll hear from us here. But until then, we'll be back with more Rising right after this.